Okay, let's start. Okay, hello everybody. I'm delighted to welcome you all to LSE India Forum's first ever Women's Empowerment panel, especially during Women's History Month. The issue of women's empowerment in India is still extremely relevant. For example, 25% of Indian adults still believe that men make better political leaders, and in domestic settings, the statistics are worse, with about 9 in 10 Indians agreeing with the notion that a wife may always obey her husband. Furthermore, 34% of Indian adults still believe that sons should have a greater right. Thus, I'm extremely happy that we are hosting this very necessary talk, specifically focused on improving the role of women in the labour market and the growth of new age women. I'm delighted to introduce our speakers today, 4 truly inspirational women who have broken boundaries in their fields. Our first speaker today is Captain Zoya Agarwal. She is an Indian commercial pilot known for commanding the longest non-stop commercial flight to India, 17 hours from San Francisco to Bengaluru, with an all-woman cockpit crew. She has also performed honourable work for the Vande Bharat mission to help evacuate Indian nationals abroad during COVID, and has worked with the United Nations as a spokesperson for generation equality. Our second speaker is Rajita Kulkarni Bagga, a global financial leader as president of the World Forum for Ethics in Business and of Sri Sri University. She has worked with organizations such as the United Nations, World Bank Group, and CERN, and is involved in numerous sustainable community development projects in villages surrounding the campus, and has launched numerous vocational employment-oriented programs for young girls. Our third speaker today is Dr. Vinita Singh Sahay, the second woman in the country to be appointed by the government of India to be a director of an IIM. Sohei is known as a leading academic in the field of marketing management. She has performed exceptional research concerning topics such as automation in Indian business, usage of social media amongst the youth and business school students, and building trust in supply chain partner relationships. Our final speaker is Dr. Jayanti Ravi, a distinguished civil servant, scientist, writer, speaker, and educator. She has held numerous distinguished posts in the Gujarat government and has played a prominent role as Principal Health Secretary, dealing with the challenges of the coronavirus, Zika virus, and swine flu. With a master's degree in nuclear physics from the University of Madras, an MPA from Harvard, and a PhD in e-governance, she has also authored books, published in international journals, guided doctoral students, and also been a visiting faculty at Harvard University. It is also an honor to be joined by our moderator today, Dr. Francesca Manzi, an assistant professor of management here at the LSE. Her work involves the way gender-based beliefs shape perceptions, evaluations, and decision-making in modern organizations, a very relevant topic concerning today's discussions. She has written papers on subjects such as the when and why women are not favored in the hiring process and how the COVID pandemic has affected traditional gender roles in the household. Also, finally, we have a few housekeeping notes. So since this is an online webinar, we might have some internet connectivity issues, but our team is going to be on it and we'll ensure that the panel discussion runs smoothly as possible. Dr. Manzi will moderate the discussion for about an hour, and then we'll have a Q&A. And the audience can send in questions through the chat box down below on the bottom right. And we'll constantly monitor and pick out the most relevant questions. Please, if your question is targeted towards a specific panelist, it's very useful to mention the name. And yeah, without further delay, I'll turn it over to Dr. Manzi. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Gina, and thank you all so much for inviting me to moderate this panel. This is incredibly interesting to me. It's a great opportunity for me to also learn from all of these incredibly accomplished women that are surrounding me right now. So I'm really excited to hear about your experiences, to hear a little bit about what you have to say and what you have learned about female empowerment and the lack thereof in your specific areas in India. And I would just kind of want to get this conversation started. So perhaps we'll just start the discussion and start hearing from you. So thank you, Gina. Thank you, Hasti. And if there are questions that come up in between the discussion, will we leave it to the end, or will we do it throughout the discussion? How do you think is best?
Perhaps, is Hasti about to speak? Sorry, I don't want to interrupt. I think
towards the end, please. Yeah.
Towards the end? Okay, great. So then let's just get started with learning a little bit about our panelists here. And well, as you all know, the topic of this panel has to do with some of the barriers that women face in the Indian workplace today. And given that you all come from such different sectors and jobs and occupations, I'm really curious to hear what your own experience has been in this regard. So perhaps telling us a little bit about the kinds of barriers that you have experienced as a woman in primarily in a lot of ways male occupations that continue to be pretty male dominated. And maybe if you can tell us a little bit about an example where you or your teams have managed to overcome some of these barriers. I think all of these experiences can be very informative to a lot of the people that are listening, and to me as well. So maybe if we can kind of get the conversation started there. I don't know if anybody wants to start. Maybe we can start with Zoya.
Sure, always happy to start. You know, there's so many barriers that I think as a woman, when you are in this world as a child, you face in a society like India, considering the era that I think all of us have grown up in, where from the very beginning, the very mindset that you're brought up in is, when you're going to grow up, the primary target for a girl child is to be settled, okay? And what that means is to get married, to have children, and look after a family of your own. And that's the agenda for life. Having said that, that is an incredibly difficult thing to do, if you ask me. It's much easier to do a job, wear my uniform, and fly off to New York. But for women who do that, full respect. However, what our system does not take into account is that every girl child is unique, and every girl child has their dreams, and no two dreams are alike. And we must give that space and freedom of thought to our children, boy or girl alike. It doesn't matter. The dreams are genderless. Dreams do not have a gender. From there, if we get our children to grow up, I think they will come up with a mindset which is far more broad-minded and liberal thinking. And that's where we're truly giving them wings to fly and liberate themselves into whatever they want to become, to be the change makers, the path breakers, the leaders of tomorrow. And I think the era that when I grew up, I was bounded by the same shackles, where I was to get married, have my children, and that was the dream of my parents for me, because I was the only girl child. I was the only child of my parents. To overcome that, Francesca, was a huge challenge, because for a small girl with dreams, with the financial means, which we did not have, from a conservative background, you're fighting against everything. Not that I would have had it any other way, because I am glad that I have overcome all those shackles of societal norms, environment, family, and I've come here, because now reaching upon here, it's not about me. I can inspire so many young girls out there to do the same, to rise above the shackles, break those invisible glass walls, and follow their dreams. So I think as a woman, it is very, very important to not let your dreams be confined to what everybody else around you wants. Because when you're growing up, your teachers, your support system, your friends, your parents, they may or may not be in your agreement of your dreams. But it is really, really important to stay focused on the path and follow your heart and your soul, whichever direction is guiding you. Work hard towards it. Be extremely meticulous, persistent, determined, dedicated towards your goals, and make them happen for you.
Thank you, Zoya. That was very inspiring. I guess one thing that maybe I would ask is can you think of any kind of, I don't know if it was people, institutions, or what were the kinds of things that that you could make use of, or that you found particularly helpful when kind of, doing away with these shackles that you refer to? So what were the kinds of things that you think helped you overcome those barriers, in addition, of course, to the drive that you're talking about, that I think is, of course, very important?
But, the drive, Francesca, also comes from seeing examples. Like, it's always, if you can see me, you can be me. Post when my story came out, I have so many girls writing to me that if you can overcome your struggles and reach here, we can too. I get messages which bring tears to my eyes sometimes of, when I was young, I had epilepsy and had lost all hope of my life. But seeing you, I can pick up the pieces of my life once again, and I can do something with my life. So those are very powerful words. When you hear such things, you want to do more and more. And that kind of becomes more of a purpose of your life, to impact the world more. So definitely, I did have my share of experiences which pushed me. Rather, I'll share with you something that happened to me in school. So I came from a background where we didn't have too many resources for what I wanted to do. And it was always a challenge to have those resources. So my teachers, when I got into 11th grade, to become a pilot, you have to have science. And I was academically, God's grace, I was always blessed. So when I did take up science, and science was a very sought after subject at that point in time, one of my teachers calls me. She's like, why are you wasting a seat of science? Why don't you maybe take humanities? Because that's going to better serve you to get married and look after your own family, rather than, you're not going to be able to become a pilot. You don't come from a background where your parents will let you do that. I mean, for a teacher to say that, it broke me. It hit me somewhere really deep, because she was the person I look up to, and suddenly those walls were coming crashing down on me. But that was the day I went home and I listened to this song called Hero by Mariah Carey. Do you all remember what the lyrics are? Okay, so it went like, when the hero comes along, gives the strength to carry on, and you cast your fears aside, and you can survive. Because when you feel like hope is gone, just look inside you and be strong. You'll finally see the truth. The hero lies in you. So that hero lies within all of us. We just have to tap that hero and look beyond, and just go with our force and determination of what we really want to do. And these kind of stereotypes are, they're going to come off and on all over your lifetimes again. Then I also had, other times I had people who, when I entered the airline, of course, I'm extremely fortunate to be a part of an equal opportunity employer like Air India. They really promote women as much as, they would promote men. There is no distinction being made to give the professional opportunity, which is incredible, But before I got a job with Air India, it was not easy, because all the other leading airlines saw a woman pilot as a headache, so to say. In fact, some of the major carriers, international carriers, till 2016 didn't even accept women pilots. And why is that? Because a woman, when she comes back from a maternity leave, has to be retrained all over again to fly the aeroplane, and there is substantial cost attached to it. This is a biological thing a woman is designed to do. If we keep our women behind, if we subject them to no jobs in a particular sector, how will we ever bring our world equal? How will we ever go towards generation equality? Which I'm so glad eventually, they address. So we need to have better maternal policies as well, in the workplaces for women to be encouraged into the unusual professions. So that was another stereotype that I battled. I could not get a job for some time. And during which, of course, I had to, I was teaching some kids aviation classes and all that, till the time I got hired by our amazing international flag carrier, which is Air India, which is an equal opportunity employer. But I'm glad those days are gone where the airlines saw women as somebody, who came with an additional cost, so to say.
Right.
So those days are slightly coming to an end, but that is for aviation industry. I am so sure that so many other industries out there now, even seeing the data, have miles to go before the equality does happen. And we all have to kind of work towards it.
Yes, and I think you've touched upon a lot of very important points. So I think what you've said about, of course, the motivation and the drive, and something that has to kind of allow a lot of women, especially young women, to say, okay, I want to do this, but the existence of role models, for example, are some of the things that also allow young women to say, I can do this. Because one thing is what you want to do, and the other thing is seeing people in positions, having the kinds of skills, the kinds of ability, the kinds of opportunity that you would hope to have if that is what you want to do. So I think that's a really important thing. And that's something that on my side of things, the research has shown that can have very positive effects also on the degree to which people continue to endorse some of those negative stereotypes that continue to hold women back. So I think that's something that's really important. And that's something that's very important to highlight, both having role models for yourself, but also the fact that you have all now become those role models as well. And I'm going to go back to that point probably after, but I also want to hear some of the experiences of some of the other panelists here as well, because they're coming from very different backgrounds. And as Zoya very well said, some of them may have been less let's say, rigid in terms of some of the gendered structures, but some of them might have been more. And that's something that I would really want to hear about, and how you saw this in your sector, and perhaps where you think there's been the most change and how that's affected your own experience. So maybe, Rajita, maybe you would want to tell us a little bit about your experience at the university.
Yeah, sure. Zoya, it's amazing to hear your story and the kind of barriers you had to overcome. And I think it's a huge inspiration for thousands, if not more, young girl students who are aspiring to break these barriers and do what you have done. It's almost the impossible. And Francesca, you spoke about role models now. So I want to pick the thread there, because for me, what happened was I had in my own home a role model. My mother was a working woman. So she started working, in free independent India. She was born immediately after just before our independence. And in the 1960s, she started working with the Central Bank of India, which is the Reserve Bank of India. She was a economics major, and she started working in 1965 in the Reserve Bank of India. So when I was born in my childhood, I had all my friends' moms used to be at home, but I used to have a mom who used to, make my breakfast and pack my lunch and send, drop me over at the auntie who used to manage the creche, and then go somewhere with her purse and come back in the evening, and then again, sort of take over the reins at home. And all her friends were doing the same thing. So I grew up looking at these incredibly strong women who were managing in the 70s. and 80s, which was like a completely different era, technologically, in the way we grew as a country. We were growing as an economy, the role of women in the first place. And these were women who were, taking trains and buses from their homes and going to their offices, doing a full day's job, coming home, managing their families. One of my most distinct, vivid memories was once when I was very sick. I had like 104 degrees temperature, and my mom couldn't take holiday for some reason from her work. And she actually forgoed, her lunchtime, and she took the train from South Mumbai to our home, which is like a 35-40 minute train ride one way, just to see me, feed me my lunch and go back, and then come back in the evening. So these were the kind of, this was the strength that I was luckily surrounded by. Also, we were a large extended family with many girl cousins. We were all together. And I think, Francesca, the one thing which I'm very grateful for was the focus my family laid on education, because nobody put pressure on, doing one thing or the other. As long as we wanted to, we studied well, we studied what we wanted to of our choice, and we pursued education. In fact, in our family, the sort of tacit rule was that if you keep studying even till you're 50, no problem, nobody will ask you to marry, etc. But yeah, if you stop studying, then what Zoya was saying also applied. But that was incredible in the 80s, in the early 90s. And I graduated from management and joined a multinational bank like Citibank. And I think I was lucky there because it was a very professional environment. Of course, one had to work very hard. And in retrospect, one, Francesca, can always say that there were biases or there was discrimination. Maybe there was, but I mean, when I look back from where I am to how far I have come, I think my personal effort has played a huge role. I have been probably lucky being in the right place at the right time, getting good opportunities. I have been very blessed with good role models. And what you said, very, very important, that the role of role models, and that's why all of us as role models for others, what we do, what we say, I am quite, I'm sorry to hear what your teacher said to you, Zoya, because, for Dr. Vinita and myself who are in education, I mean, everything we do or don't do is influencing the minds of our students. So I think leading by example and breaking the barriers, Francesca, I run a masterclass on breakthrough leadership for women, and women from about 45 countries I have already participated in my masterclass. And what is most shocking for me to repeatedly discover is that we always look at what are the external challenges we face, right? Policies, procedures, biases, prejudices, judgments, evaluations, environments, cultural norms, religious norms, societal norms that might be dissuading us from what we probably are able to do or probably should be able to do to our full potential. We normally have that as our mindset. But what is shocking for me is that more than that, the kind of internal barriers we as women kind of put on ourselves or don't break through are equally, if not more, responsible. So I want to draw the attention of all young girl students and who are listening to us today to look at, therefore, what can I conquer for myself? Because what I need to change outside is definitely there. And I think those of us who are, Jayanti ji is here, Zoya, Vinita ji, all of us, we are in positions where we can demonstrate the intentionality of our leadership to make the change happen. So that is our responsibility. And I think that is on our table. But what each of us also needs to look at is what is it that from within I can change myself, because that is empowering. You feel disempowered when you say, what, I can't progress because this stops me or that stops me or this one discriminates. That is disempowering. But you stop looking at that and look within and say, these are the three things I can change for myself. These are the three things I can improve for myself. And there are many things, research is showing there are many things which is dissuading women from discovering our full potential within us than even outside us. So for me, the answer lies within what can we discover and what can we break through. And I think that is where each of us doing it ourselves and leading by example, role modeling it is very, very important. And there is enough data today to show that why we need more women in leadership positions, why we need more women in positions of decision making. Look at what is happening in the world around us. In 1 week, the world has changed. As you know, as we speak, the world is changing. And I think we have a very important role to play, a very important voice to be heard. And I'm delighted that you're hosting this conversation and, asking these important questions.
Thank you so much, Rajita. That's also just very important to hear as well, because it gives us also some more perspective on the kinds of things that we can do. So I think that there's from what you've said, I think a very important part of your message, if I understood correctly, and I agree as well, is that there is a lot that also that we can't really say much about where it's coming from. And even if we can't do anything about it in terms of the origins, right, of stereotypes and those kinds of things, there is a lot of that that's internalized, and that to the degree that we can also discover, we can also recognize what kinds of barriers we have within us because of what we've learned, or because of maybe those barriers that came up very early on. We might have some of the tools, hopefully, and some of the ability to try to also start overcoming those barriers that we have for ourselves. And I think that that's another really important thing, apart from the things that we can do more structurally, apart from the kinds of change that we might be able to affect externally through, for example, this role modeling. So it's of course like a very dynamic process, right? And it just goes kind of back and forth, like seeing you as these very strong female role models will empower women to say, hey, maybe I've been holding myself back as well, because it does look like this is something that I could do, right? So it kind of goes both ways. And another really interesting thing that you said more towards the beginning that I think is something that we forget sometimes, is that a lot of the times when we think about leadership and when we think about gender and leadership, there's a big, I would say there's more of a focus put on kind of the sort of like more traditionally masculine aspects of this, right? Like leadership is about being dominant and assertive, and that's where the kind of power comes from. But I think, Rajita, you described very well how also seeing these very powerful women in positions of caring is also something that's very, very important. And that's also something that we should be expecting from our leaders, and that we should hope our leaders are able to embody. So power can be seen both from these more, let's say, dominant kinds of figures, but also from very powerful caregiving figures, which have been more traditionally associated with more feminine roles. So I think that's another thing that I think is important to rescue, that this is a very important part of this narrative that we're trying to build, right, about leadership.
Absolutely, Francesca. In fact, if you look at some of the reports which talk about leadership skills required for the future to succeed in the kind of future we are, we are entering as we speak, a maximum percentage of those qualities are more feminine qualities: empathy, the ability to care, the ability to connect, the ability to the spirit of compassion. And I have always advocated, Francesca, that you don't have to change who you are to become who you need to be. What we as women bring to our leadership style is so uniquely necessary today in the world. The pandemic has shown us, Vinita ji and I have spoken on so many panels together. In 2 days, our life was disrupted, and all our students had to move online and study online, learn online, which none of us were ever prepared for. None of us knew how to do it as well as we needed to. And the students didn't know how to learn online. And at the same time, you had this horrific pandemic engulfing us, and you could not survive through it without that empathy, without that ability to show that we genuinely care. So I think we bring very, very distinct advantages by our very being, by our very nature, and we should celebrate that rather than change who we are to sort of fit some sort of a, predefined role.
Idea or yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, I completely agree. And I think that's also very important to say at this time, especially because it's what you're saying is true. It is something that's being more and more appreciated, and that we're realizing as a world that this kind of leadership is also important. There was, I think, a headline during the pandemic about how women-led countries were doing quite a bit better when dealing with a pandemic than countries that were led by men. I don't, this is sort of anecdotal. I don't know if any of this can be is empirically tested, but at least from the experience and what you could see of the outcomes of these countries at the moment, it did seem like there was something there. Anyway, so maybe we could continue with Vinita.
Yeah, thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity with all these wonderful women that are there sitting across. I represent education, but more so business education. So again, if statistically speaking, I was going through some reports, Deloitte reports, of course, that in 2014 in India, there were about 2.7% women representation on board, on the corporate boards. It grew to 3.2% in 2016, went all the way to 13.8% in 2018. And
13%, huh? Oh,
and
wow,
in
that's
2021, we are standing at 17.1%.
That's, I think, probably one of the fastest growing percentages I've seen for this for that statistic. That's amazing.
There were times we were growing at 180% per annum. And that's the reason from a very dismal 3-point-some%, not too far back. Yes, but there was one thing which was responsible for it, which was there was a law put in place. So,
so the structure
and all the the regulatory bodies, they made it compulsory for Indian boards to have women representation. They made it compulsory for boards to have independent directors who were women. But having said it, what is very encouraging is that at least it is happening. And mind you, this is if not better, but definitely at par with global standards across. Like other day, I was reading that even in UK, where Her Majesty Queen is there, still the figures are more or less the same. So, which is at one end very encouraging. But what also is a fact that among these women on board, how many of them are chairpersons? And the word chairperson itself, how many times do we use the word chairperson, and how many times do we still continue to use the word chairman? That's again, it's a reflection of what the thought process is all about. Today only I was doing a training program, and I played a very, very common trick wherein I said that, okay, a father and a son were traveling in a car, and the car met with an accident. The father died. And when the son was taken to the hospital, the surgeon walked in, he looked at the patient and he said, the surgeon looked at the patient and surgeon said, I can't operate. He's my son. And I asked the participants, how did it happen? And can you believe it? After even 7 to 8 minutes of conversation, somebody said it could be ghost, somebody said it could be grandfather, but nobody said that surgeon could be mother. So yes, we still carry those stereotypes. So what Zoya was mentioning, that pilots would be more often than not men, So these stereotypes, they still prevail. But again, I'm a born optimist. And what I really also look to is that things are changing, at least in my corporate India, in my business world. Yes, at times we are making what we call it as reservations. We are making entitlements. But then, yes, it is kind of a correction that we are trying to attempt for ages of discrimination, ages of suppressing. So right now we're doing that. So even at an IIM, I feel happy to say that initially the percentage of girls used to be very dismal. If I talk about my campus also, in 2000, as late as 2018, I had one girl student. And if I recollect, she was to join us and she came with her parents from very interior part of the country along with her parents, and her father was signing the form and he happened to ask us, okay, how many are the other girls? And I said, sorry, you're the only one. And the parent got up because he could not understand that from the interior part of the country, how could he leave behind his daughter in a campus which is having only one girl child. And I recollect it was about 4.5 hours of deep, intense counseling, a reassurance of the variety because we were a new campus. And I said that, okay, I don't generally give my mobile number to parents, but here it is. You are on my hotline. No matter what time of the day you are going to call me, I'm going to respond. And can you believe it? I actually gave a room next to my room for her for staying. And for me, we have this whole Indian slogan that I don't know how many would understand, Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao. That means you have to encourage the girl child to study and to grow. And I used to always say, this is the way we have to go about it, that one girl at a time. And next year it was 3, and next to next year it was 66. So which is how we're going to make it happen. Okay, then next year it dropped to 45, but again we are aspiring that we'll take it forward. And what happens is when they are there in the class, the whole climate, the whole environment in the class changes, and the whole ecosystem recognizes that the diversity of perspectives that a female student may bring in class, the different kind of ideas, the different treatment to the same subject. So the boys also realized that they were acting like clones, and now there is somebody else who's giving up an idea which is different. And this workforce is also very encouraging, that when the recruiters are coming on campus, the girls are getting selected first, because even on companies there are agendas to promote diversity, to take in more girls. But having said it, yes, I won't say that it is also hunky-dory. Even when I look at because I've been in this profession for more than 2.5 decades now. So I still believe that, yes, there's something called what we call it as leaking pipeline. So I was looking at the data, and somewhere it was said that, okay, out of the 42% which reached that graduate and postgraduate level, 29% managed to reach at the middle management level, and then 9% to senior, and only maybe 3% to further up. So that means there is a leakage happening. And more, no matter how hard we are trying, it is increasingly becoming difficult for women as they climb up the ladder. So that means there are some forces which are still acting on that. Mostly when I started reflecting back that what could be those challenges which are kind of holding back these women, and how do we still in the corridors of corporate boardrooms, we still have these conversations like, do you think she can do it? Do you think she'll be able to manage a corporate conglomerate? Do you think we can give her the promotion? And definitely all this, all these conversations which we hear in the workspaces, there are many reasons to it. And if I can think of it, yes, there is one reason that even we as women, we tend to have, we tend to undervalue ourselves. There's a sense of lack of self-belief. I don't know where it comes from, whether the society makes it we've been grown up that way, that and if I can put just a small example, when in India you learn driving, the boy would learn driving and you won't even know that he has learned driving, because he'll borrow car from either his father or his brother, and that's it. But when a girl child learns driving, the whole society gets to know of it. that, okay, right now Rajita is learning driving, because there would be one special occasion, somebody, brother or father would sit next to her, and in a very chaperone way, she'll be taught that. So, and there would be still apprehension that would she drive as well? Would she do the same job as well? Of course, people like Zoya and all are breaking barriers that we can drive planes better, we can drive cars better. But there is a whole thought process which still would need time to. Someone of you did talk about there are still lack of what we call it as professional networks and role mentors. I remember when I was growing up, this lady, Kiran Mazumdar Shaw or Naina Kidwai, they were the role models. But Naina Kidwai was the first woman at Harvard from India. So that was the first crop which was coming up. Now, of course, we have Falguni Nayars and so many very successful women in the corporate world, and especially in the area of finance and banking. But yes, initially, and still to a large extent in so many other professions, lack of role models is also. We can't deny that there is sexual harassment not there. And not just in India, I think it's a global phenomenon. And I think hashtag Me Too has exposed it like never before. So many stories have come out of closets. So many women have come out and very bravely shared. And there was a Me Too community which was so supportive to each other. And it was a very, very bold initiative, if I can say. And definitely there were so many lessons the other gender would have taken from these kind of campaigns, because decade-old cases were discussed in publicly, and there were so many people who were held responsible for the things which they had done which were not appropriate. So it is a reality, it is there, and the very fact that we are taking a strong objection to it and action around it is very, very encouraging.
Yes.
One thing which is there is a salary gap or a wage gap. In a country like ours, where cricket is not just a passion, but almost a religion, there's always a media hype around the salary which Virat Kohli gets from BCCI, which is, I'm told, 7 crores, or what, Mithali Raj or Smriti Mandhana would get, I'm told it is 30 lakhs. So maybe for you, it is difficult to understand the difference between 30 lakhs and 7 crores, because I'm talking in the figures. But yeah, translated to millions and thousands, it's a huge gap, So, but then yes, if I look at from commercial sense, and Smriti herself said it that no, I cannot demand 7 crores, which Virat Kohli is demanding, because end of the day, it's all revenue game. So male cricket is seen more, the viewership is more, the revenues are more. So I can only ask for that component. Maybe what we have to work is to make it more popular, to bring in more revenue, because the business world will understand in terms of revenue and bottom lines only. So yes, but the wage parity remains a reality. So you hear major leading actresses now demanding wage parity because they feel that they can carry the movies on their shoulders. They can carry the entertainment businesses on their shoulders, and which, yes, increasingly societies are, Indian societies accepting. For sure, issues which, all women, we all feel that the lack of flexibility in terms of working hours, or lack of work-life balance, especially the maternity benefits and post-pregnancy, all these are the issues which are there, which needs very constant, and of course, India is doing great in terms of creating the statutory regulations around it. So recently, finally, we do have 6 months of maternity break, which was unthinkable a few years ago. And law is there, may not be practiced 100% in the true letter and spirit, but the very fact that we are doing such initiatives, we're taking up these bold steps is also very encouraging. So to put it together, I think we're in the right direction, and collectively, if all of us continue to, to be there, hang out there, and do what it takes, sooner or later, we would be no more a fairer sex or a weaker sex. We would be definitely be treated as at par. That's how I feel about the industry where I represent. And in any case, education is one industry where women representation, as Rajita would agree, is in any case one of the best that the country has. We have maybe because of the quality needed for this kind of profession, as mentioned, empathy, and all that what it takes, nurturer. But let's not even stereotype that. We had Margaret Thatcher and Indira Gandhi as iron ladies, known as iron ladies and great leaders. And we also have in today's time what you were mentioning, Jacinda, who is seen as a compassionate leader of New Zealand and doing much better, as you mentioned, in terms of COVID handling and other issues handling, whatever the issues New Zealand had been facing in recent times. So we're doing a great job. And
thank you so much, Vinita. I think that was also a nice way to kind of wrap up, because I think that what you're saying is very true. And one of the things that I really like is that you've all touched upon kind of different aspects of gender inequality. So we've heard a lot about, kind of following your dream and doing what you want to do and being who you want to be, and trying to overcome your own barriers. We've heard about how you can be important role models for other people, but we also now hear a little bit about some of the structural barriers that have existed, but also how those same structures can sometimes shift to go quicker in the direction of gender equality, right? So we've seen how the numbers just kind of went up so fast after some measures were implemented or after some legislation was put in place. And even then, we're still pretty far behind. I mean, when we think about something like 20%, when we think about it in the grand scheme of things, it's like 20% is not that much. But when you compare 20% to 2%, it's huge, right? And I think that that's kind of where we have to kind of think of those two sides of things. We have to think of not wanting to conform and not wanting to say 20% is enough. We want more, but at the same time recognize that there has been so much advanced and that we're not stagnated, that we're not stuck, and that we're not in the same place that we were even 10 years ago. And so I think both of those forces need to be there so that people can feel like you can mobilize something or that you can affect change, because otherwise you can feel like nothing's ever going to change, or you feel like we already got there. And another thing that maybe I was thinking about a little bit more, right, in terms of stereotypes, also because that's my area of study, is that's the part that's so hard, because stereotypes are so hard to change. They lag in time. Like, you can see things change in the exterior world, but that doesn't mean that the stereotypes change immediately. You still see that a lot of this is very ingrained. And so even when we think that we've kind of gotten there, you still have then the teachers, like Zoya was saying, that are going to push you down because they don't think that that's the best decision for you. Even they might have your best interest in mind, or maybe that's what they think, the best intentions, but they think you're better off being a housewife, and they're going to try to push you in that direction. And if you're, if you don't know anything else, you might also start believing it a little bit. So you need people to kind of tell you otherwise, and you also need those small acts, right? Like Vinita was saying, like, maybe sometimes you do actually break your own rules and give out that phone number, and that's going to help that first woman maybe start, and then come 3, and then come 60. So I think that that's another really encouraging aspect of what you've told us, Vinita. So thank you very much. And now I want to hear a little bit more about the health sector. So Jayanti, if you could tell us a little bit about what your experience has been, especially I guess these past years have been quite intense for you in particular, but not just with COVID, right? Even right before that was Zika. So it hasn't, you don't seem to have caught a break in the past few years.
Well, absolutely, Francisca. It was absolutely wonderful listening to Zoya, Rajita, and Vinita. And I mean, we did speak of different barriers that we face. And I think what's interesting is, although we may represent different fields, different areas, but I think there is a lot of common barriers. There's a common story underlying thing there. And I do feel that, as was said, maybe even in the career years, no matter which profession you are in, but if you really want to straddle, because I think a lot of us also want to have that complete life where you don't want to have a unidimensional life. You want to be a more complete woman. You want to have your children, your family. And I think when you do that, there are those initial years when you find that if you're not, compared to the male counterparts, you may not have the time to attend those conferences, networking, dinners, and so on, which you do sometimes. It does make you feel that, am I losing out on it? Although in the long term, I think it's ultimately the grit, your perseverance, what you kind of, your determination that you bring and your passion to your work, which does eventually stay with you. But this kind of socializing, traveling, etc., also is something that is there. And of course, again, on this, I would also say that oftentimes the stereotype is there, prevalent in the people that you know, in the ecosystem where you are embedded. So when you go to carry out a role, professional role that you have been assigned, I mean, I can even think of the times when I went to teach quantitative techniques at Harvard University. I was teaching a program there. So, maths program, and then here is a lady, and you may want to have your identity. You go in a sari with a bindi. And so initially, probably there's a little bit of a, but then I think that patina wears off. After some time, it's not about what you wear, how you look, but I think that it's a direct connect between you and your students. And you see those eyes sort of popping up, which means, yeah, they understood it. And then you, after a few months or whatever, you realize you've been nominated for the Dean's Excellence Awards in Teaching. And you realize it's okay to be what you were, as you said, to believe in yourself, the point that all of us here are making. It's also about realizing that to treat triumph and disaster with equality. And coming back to what you said about the health sector, I was there for about 4 years in Gujarat. And boy, I must say it was quite an intense 4 years, because in the health sector, it's almost as if every day there is something or the other, if nothing, the media, it also becomes a bit of a soft target. It's always easy to complain, isn't it? That, this hospital has this problem, etc. And just as you fix one, the entire scale of it is so big. And yet, I realized that while you have many programs, a lot of it, you have an entire team, particularly when you talk of public health and of course, medical colleges, medical education services, all of it was there. So leading that entire team itself, I thought was a great privilege, but of course, a huge challenge that really had to, you had to be up on your toes, thinking, addressing them. And I think that's where oftentimes the qualities that we spoke about, sometimes in bureaucracy, it's also a bit of the command and control, that's the prevalent kind of approach. And there, but when you handle things with that sense of sensitivity, compassion, and yet when there's grit, there's firmness, politeness, you're sensitive, you find that you really start inspiring your team and things happen. I mean, I want to also share here that in the health sector, I was dealing with a workforce of about 150,000 people in Gujarat. In all, that was my team, starting with, at the place where, as you would say, the last mile, or I would actually say that's the first mile, where the tire touches the ground. You had people like the accredited social health activists, or they're known as ASHAs. These are village women, possibly some of them not even up to the O levels or the 10th grade kind of, competence, etc. But the women with huge aspirations, a keen, desire to learn, and they are literally the workforce that handles, all the maternal health issues and so on. So we used to have these action seminars, and we started this practice of actually getting all of them together where, because they're the guys who really know where the shoe pinches. So you had these people right on the ground, all the way up to the obstetric ICU, the specialists. And sometimes these are like untouchable barriers that, the levels of literacy, education. So, but you put them all around a white board with those posters on the ground with, markers, right, whiteboard markers, and they're all suggesting their ideas. And then when you put it together, after all, the strength of a chain is the strength of its weakest link. So to give one small example, we were grappling with, I heard Vinita speaking about leaking pipelines, how, the constituency or the denominator itself is small as you go along, and there's more and more leakages. Finally, those that make it to the top are very small. So if you really go to a blocked pipeline, what I mean is we still have the scourge in India of what is known as female feticide, because there is the stereotype still persisting in many communities, in many areas, where they believe that it's not a great idea to have a daughter. And so the sex ratio, for example, in Gujarat, when I took over as the Principal Secretary Health in 2017, I was absolutely appalled, where the number was somewhere in the range of 850 per thousand. And we thought we must address this, which means that there are young babies, young girl, female babies not being allowed. And this was also a social and behavior change concern, because it's not just about action, but you have to make people realize that you can't force this, but you have to work on both the sides. And we also took up a massive drive. We took up all these prenatal diagnostics. There is centers where they do ultrasonography and do a sex determination when the baby is still in the womb at a very early stage. So we had a two-pronged strategy where we would start, going on raids to all these centers, and wherever we would have these, something like shall I say, a raid, and quietly somebody goes undercover, and when you discovered it, you would seal the premises and, pay a heavy penalty, etc. So there was that fear also that had to be invoked. But parallelly, we also worked on really making mothers feel, and all these role models, we got pilots, bankers, scientists to say that, and ultimately it's a lot of times parents also realize later on that it's the daughter who's often, more emotionally clued in to the parents, to the mother, etc. I'm not trying to make a judgment here, but that's also something that a lot of parents realize. So when you talk about that, it's a shift that happens. And with all these efforts and using technology, I must say that we were persistent. In 2017, this happened. And then finally, last year, when after 4 years, we found that the sex ratio had improved to 950, 951 to be precise, even better than Kerala. So that was something very special for us. This was the National Family Health Survey, which is an independent data. It's not the data that we report, but that's done for the entire country, which means on an average, we used to have about 12 lakh or 1,200,000 deliveries per annum. And if about 100 girl children were being saved every year, it meant about 120,000 girl babies. And where were these missing girls? So it felt very gratifying. And this was all done with the entire team, right from that last mile lady, the Ashas. So when you really work in a team and you try and counsel the mothers and say, it doesn't matter, there might be a mother-in-law, there might be, a sister-in-law, sometimes forcing the woman or sometimes a husband to say, no, you've already had 2 daughters, etc. To give her that confidence and say that, no, we can, that her sense of self-esteem, confidence to be able to assert herself. And if there are people who can also stand by her, support her, I think this is a great thing that we can all collectively do. And another note, I also feel that women, while I'm completely agree that our self-esteem, confidence is absolutely something essential, but I also feel that sometimes this vulnerability that we as women have is also a beautiful quality, not to be totally, all a little too arrogant and full of ourselves. That I really know I'm the cat's whiskers, and I know instead of that little bit of humility to be open, and that often gives us insights and we look at problems a little differently, probably, and that's why you're able to crack these. And when you do a summation, all of it, you find that the results can be good. And in a similar, you asked me about my 4 years, especially the COVID years. So it's like initially when you start and when you're working, you're doing all of this. there are moments when the media really, sort of puts you all the way up and calls you a COVID warrior #1, and you're like on all the television screens and all of that. And then some things start going bad. I mean, because COVID, again, was something that really shook all of us up. There was no clear protocol yet. What is the cause of it? What's the kind of treatment protocol? It was all changing. And I mean, we were all struggling. So a few weeks down the line, few months down the line, suddenly, they need someone to criticize, and there you are. So it's a very big roller coaster ride. So in all of this, I think we really need to have developed that sense of, that real strong metal within, which is inherent in all of us. And as I think Rajita also mentioned, it's not just about the outer, but actually that deep strength within, and believe in ourselves, and not really get swayed by, a whole lot of adulation and praise. So I often say it's not about the gloss, but it's about that glow. You straddle through different situations. There are different experiences you go through. But if you can keep your composure, your patience, perseverance, and yet be absolutely firm, determined, and carry out, and also this ability to harmonize things. That's again something that we're fairly good at. You're able to do also multitasking. You've kept something. So there are several things that you're able to handle together. So these are certain skills that probably come to us together. And so we also have that metal. So we're not fragile. You may not be the command and control kind of person. So you can really be transformational leaders and lead your team. And on a similar note, I want to also share another small thing that happened. 2017, the health sector, we have this rating of different states of India by the United Nations and NITI, which is a national entity, Niti Aayog, and they do it with completely third-party entities. So we were at the 17th rank, actually 18th to be precise at that time. I mean, if you count the union territories and so on. So again, this sort of a huddle where we got all the stakeholders together. So we'd have these action seminars, figure out what are the areas we need to plug, and then follow up. I think that's again something, this detailing, follow up, a small daily task, if it be done really daily, it gives huge results rather than just a spasmodic push. So I think sometimes it's not about doing something completely different, but even that, regularity, that consistency. And so this, with all this, including the sex ratio, maternal deaths, it would really make me feel very, very upset because, in families and communities that we all come from, our friends, you don't hear of women dying during childbirth anymore. But then on an average per day, when I joined, we would have 3 to 4 mothers dying during childbirth, which was not acceptable. I mean, these were needless deaths. And when you really went and did a maternal death audit for each of these, we'd finally find that the interfacility transfer, or sometimes the doctor was not available then. So you'd really go down, and not necessarily by suspending people or issuing charge sheets or disciplining or throwing them out. But I think even with a sensitive approach, but when you go there and say, well, this was the entire cause, do we see it? There is a transformation. And we found that the MMR, the maternal mortality ratio, infant mortality, all this started improving significantly. It's about just measuring and looking at the right indicators. So our rank improved to the 8th rank, and the 4th year as I was leaving Gujarat to come to this new role at a very fabulous concept. Probably I'll just talk about it in a minute. The ranking of Gujarat in this health sector, these SDG 3, good health and well-being, had gone up to the 1st rank, which was kind of a big gift for us, a little unthinkable, because Gujarat has not been a state which is very well known for the social sector as much as for industry and so on. So which means that there is no magic silver bullet or mantra. But I think when there is a team, concerted effort, you to go about it scientifically, figuring out what are the challenges, how do I plug them, measure it, and then constantly upgrade the skills. We got in people like WHO, UNICEF, Stanford, and I think that whole fun of working together. And then I think women are also oftentimes multi-talented. So we also got them to use, because a lot of health is about behavior change communication. I mean, the process of actually giving a jab or injection probably takes 30 seconds, 1 minute, 2 minutes, but getting her to agree to it, come there to the hospital, that portion is far more difficult. And I feel the softer things are the harder things. The harder things are probably easier sometimes, it's just brick and mortar, but then getting people to, so the kind of time we had to invest to motivate them, talk. So we got a whole army of our own health professionals, all these ashas and all of them, as, some kinds of champions who would go and talk with them, engage with them, sort of man banao. Man means mind. Banao is actually sculpt the mind by reasoning out with them, persuading. You can't coerce them and say, hey, I drag you and here's the immunization, vaccination for universal immunization. But it's actually by making her realize. So I think all these things were very good. And another last thing, so many years ago, there's an experience I can't forget, nearly, I think, 17, 18 years ago. I go to this village called Poonsari, which is in Gujarat, in a small district called Sabarkantha, and had a sort of informal meeting with the women there. We were thinking, should we skill these women? How about getting them sewing machines or probably something, food processing and so on? So I asked the women, what is it, hey, that you'd like to learn? And did you know what they said? 17 years ago, they said, we want to learn driving. We want to learn computers. We want to learn to speak English. And I said, wow. So a lot of times we make assumptions about what they want to learn. But if you sit with them, and maybe these are the things that empower them. And that's that. So respecting that. And of course, you also want a village not to have just, all the 100 women doing computers, but you also want to have someone who's into, beautician and someone into this, etc. This is not to say that there's a totem pole and you want people up there, down there. I mean, everything is equally important and good. So these are some thoughts. And I'm absolutely delighted, as everyone said, this whole thing of mentors and mentees. We've to really be thankful for so many women, including our own role models at home. My mother, for example, I think the kind of, she's a great scholar of Sanskrit, and I've seen the way she used to straddle home, going to her university at a later age, studying. Even today, she's on the computer teaching so many people, translating books, and then handling her great-grandson as well, taking care of all of us. I mean, I think that is what, instead of complaining that, well, men don't do it, I think if we realize we too have the strength, and we can probably also motivate men and women. It's not just, again, a gender-based, these are roles for men and women. But I think a lot of times we teach people far more powerfully by silence. We don't have to talk. We don't have to shout. We don't have to be angry. But just by being patient, you can really move and elevate a lot of people, inspire a lot of people. And I think a lot of us are doing that directly, indirectly. And I want to salute all those women. A lot of times early in the morning, I would go on election duty and find young girls in auto rickshaws going to school. Their hair would be all braided, which means their moms got up early, with that aspiration of sending that child to school, comb her hair, make sure, even from a very modest family, making sure she has a uniform, a little tiffin dabba, as we would say, a little snack box with something for her to eat. So these are the women who maybe 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and hence they would be leaders of transformation, change.
Right.
So again, a diehard optimist, and I see a lot of wonderful things happening. Of course, this is not to say that there are things that obviously need to improve, and we should be at it, not give up. But I think it's possible to be that change and see that change.
Thank you so much, Jayanti. There's, I think, so much to think about, and it's such a also rich experience, and also hearing a different kind of approach with this, right? Now, I think talking about just how important the community is to start affecting change. So we talked about role models. Of course, everybody has mentioned that, but we forget that sometimes it's not even, we don't necessarily just need that one person, but you know how it says it takes a village. It's true too. One person alone oftentimes will do a lot, but can't do everything. And sometimes it might even be better to just have a group in the community to provide support, to help talk to people, to see that maybe the way that they're going about making decisions might not necessarily be the wisest, the fairest, even the most strategic for them. So just having a group of people that knows how to talk to others, that knows how to communicate, and that knows what kind of bonds they well, because they have a shared bond already, is another really important tool that oftentimes we forget. I think when we think about how we want to go about things, we think about it very much top down, but you've really highlighted the fact that a lot of the things have to also be bottom up. We can't just tell people what they need to be doing. We also have to listen to people and also help empower people so they can also do it themselves. And that works, right? That's what you've been telling us, and that's what your data shows, is that this, like, if you take a meticulous approach, if you get people involved and you go step by step, not just the one, strict rule, that does something, and it does something that's significant. And I think that that's another thing that we should be considering. And it's not just about, creating just putting the spotlight on certain people, but also allowing other people that maybe don't want to be in the spotlight, but they still want to do something to help and give them tools, or even just listen to the tools that they already have that we might not even know they have. So I think all of this has been very enlightening, and I love that we've been talking about these just vastly different areas, and how you have sort of your own experience has been so different. But I think a lot of us, and just hearing your stories, have kind of reached very similar conclusions. The importance of having people to look up to, the importance of having support, the importance of believing in yourself, the importance also of communication, of empathy, of knowing how and when to listen. I think that that's another very important part. And I think lastly, one of the things that I think came up in the last point that Jayanti was just talking about, it's not just about women, right? This is not something that we do ourselves, or that the burden should only be on the women. It's also the men. Men can also participate in this. Men can also be convinced that they also can sit down and listen, that they can maybe sometimes also be quiet, or sometimes also just be the compassionate one. That's also a very important skill. So maybe it's not just about, women becoming more dominant, or trying to just be the most assertive one in the room. Sometimes assertiveness is not what's needed. And in that sense, men can also learn to be a little bit less assertive and a little bit more compassionate. So that's another thing that I think we want to sort of talk about when we talk about gender, that it's everybody that's part of in this, right? We're all in this together. So just because we have about 15 minutes of time left, I'd like to open up the floor for questions from the audience. So I think that Gina has been able to maybe collect some questions.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes, so if anyone would like to send some more questions, there's the chat right down at the bottom. So we have one question which is specifically for Zoya, and it's from Mona, who's actually an aspiring pilot, and she's specifically asking how to convince her family of her dream, saying that her family want her to either become a doctor or do a government job or get married. So yeah, this is, yeah.
Okay, so shall I start it? Firstly, I want to tell all of you guys how amazing it has been to hear this talk. I had goosebumps listening to Rajita ji, Vinita ji, Jayanti ji, and Francesca. You were amazing. If I were to figure out, normally I can pretty much, as pilots, I always say we have microseconds to make a decision. And normally I make a decision very fast. But if I were to make a decision here in the room, who is my favorite? I will not be able to do that, because I think all of you were amazing, and you got so many amazing points that you all touched upon, and including Francesca, how you assimilated everything. I think all of us went towards one particular thing, which is that India is very forthcoming towards women empowerment. The very image that India had all across the world of lower numbers in terms of key leadership roles for women are proven not so effective by the numbers that we are talking about today. The numbers are doing magnificently well. Even in aviation, we are #1 in terms of women pilots. When I joined Air India, I was amongst a handful of girl pilots. And today we are staring at 2,764 licensed women pilots amongst the total of 17,726 total license holders in India. And that is a figure which is amazing, jaw-droppingly amazing, I feel, because that is like almost touching 15% now. And not to forget, in aviation sector, now I'm going to come to the question. We are looking at 800,000 pilots by the year 2038. That's Boeing's prediction. That is the number of pilots we're going to need by then. But for that, we need our children of today to see role models in the uniform, in the schools, to take up STEM subjects. We have to go out there and promote the STEM subjects for our children to come up to non-traditional professions. How you all spoke about how we, when we see a particular profession as a pilot or as a doctor, like how, you very well spoke about how a surgeon was never expected to be a mother. Those stereotypes, those days are gone. There was a study, I was actually just reading up about it, that when a number of subjects were shown a doctor or an astronaut or a pilot, they all said it's a male, it's clear cut. Or when it was a nurse or a teacher, then it's a woman. No more are those days when we're going to be subjected by the stereotypes. I think if all of us as the leaders, as in key leadership positions, take a vow to change the world, we truly can. And the power lies within all of us. The power to go ahead or not lies within all of us. It's only you who can stop yourself or go further ahead. And to really, whenever, the going gets tough, to read the impossible as I am possible, which is what I would like to talk to Mona. When she feels things against her, this is what she should focus on and work hard towards what she can do to convince her parents in her favor. Because you always have to have your parents' support with you. It's always good to have blessings and support and rally them with you. Explain to them. If nothing else, I'll be more than happy to talk to them. Please get in touch with me. But, it's very, very important to pursue your dreams, Mona, because if you don't, who else will? You have that key, you have that power to either stop yourself or push forward. So please exercise it and follow your dreams by showing them that you truly, really want it with all the hard work that you're putting in towards your goal.
Francesca, I want to add a point here to supplement what Zoya is saying, because I think we are sharing our stories and each of our stories comes with our context. But I think we have many young girls who are listening to us today. And I would like to say a few things. What can you do for yourself? Because your story is yours alone. And I very much believe that no matter what the stage and age of our life we are at, we can write our own story. So I have a few pieces of advice, if you may allow me to indulge me. Please. Number one, I want to say to all the girls who are listening to us, that don't fear to dream big. Don't fear to dream big. Don't fear to dream big, because anybody who comes to tell you that your dream is too big for you, he doesn't or she doesn't know your reality and your story. So your dream is yours. You dream big. And sometimes dreams become too out there. I am a big believer of micro goals. Dr. Jayanti was explaining with so many meticulous examples. That is the power of micro goals. We are living in a world where even 3 years is long term. Make micro goals. They can be weekly goals, monthly goals, quarterly goals. Translate your dreams into micro goals that are practical, achievable, trackable. That's number one. Number two, measure them, and celebrate them. I find that as women, we are so tough on ourselves that the minute we achieve something, we are already on to the next thing. And I think we all need to pause and celebrate what we have done, so that, I believe that that gives the turbo power to do more. So celebrate, get into the habit of celebrating your achievements. It doesn't matter how big or small they are. Dr. Jayanti's example shows us that when you take a goal and when you track to it and you celebrate something as difficult as the male-female ratio, you can change in a period of 5 years. So celebrate small milestones, your milestones. That's number 2. Number 3, I feel, and Francesca, you are a teacher, we are all in education, I think we have stopped reading and writing. Sometimes I ask students, what are you reading these days? And they give me some Instagram or Twitter handles of people. So I think we need to develop, each of us, develop a deep understanding of the world we are in, what is happening around us, how that is relevant to us, how that is impacting us, and to write. The more we write, the more we are able to critically think, the more we are able to consolidate our thoughts. So I would urge everybody who's listening today, you write a few lines about what you took away from this conversation. When you write it, it consolidates in you. So number 1, don't hesitate to dream big. Number 2, translate it into tangible, chewable goals for yourself. 3, celebrate what you achieve. 4, read and write, read and write, read and write, read and write. And to add to that, speak. Because, today we are a studio by ourselves. I don't need a studio. I don't need a producer. I have my phone, I record something and I put it on YouTube, and I can, I have my own, I have my own production house. The more you speak, the more you chisel your conversation, you will realize, the more you chisel your communication, you will realize there is a storehouse of ideas inside you, and nothing can stop you then. When you have ideas that you can share, I think that is very important. So read, write, speak, and lastly, network. Dr. Jayanti spoke, it is indeed today, LinkedIn research shows that 85% of jobs are filled through networking. There is a Harvard research which shows that women don't get boardroom positions because women are not considered to have big enough networks. So we need to build networks, and it is easy in this world to build networks. We are already a network. We are getting so many opportunities to build virtual networks, build networks, and contribute to the networks. Sometimes we think, oh, I'm not a networking type. Well, you didn't, I think that you didn't get the meaning of networking. Networks are to be contributed to, then to be leveraged. We think we need to leverage networks, but I believe we need to first contribute to the networks. And then they will kind of feed us back automatically. So build networks, reach out. You are a generation which can have access to what Elon Musk is thinking, what Bill Gates is thinking, because you can follow them on Twitter. When we were growing up, we didn't have that. We had to go and sit in libraries and look at big books and then, mull over them. So build networks. And Francesca, I want to offer the fact that, I think we spoke about role modeling and mentorship. I advise everybody, find a mentor and be a mentor. There are all of you who may be students, you have young cousins, young nephews, nieces, find anybody and mentor them. Because when you start mentoring, you start growing. And as a gesture today, Francesca, I want to offer that I am happy to mentor 5 girl students for the coming year, who are on this platform, and they can reach me and I will be happy to mentor them for the coming year. I think we all have that responsibility to mentor others and we need to seek mentorship. I think women don't get themselves mentored as much as I see men doing it actively. So these are a few things I think are very, very important that each of us can do. And I think that will keep shaping and reshaping the context of our life as we grow. So I am very happy to receive your emails, messages, write to me on LinkedIn, and I'm very happy to mentor 5. That's the capacity right now, and when more becomes available, we can do more. So happy to do that.
Thank you so much for that offer, Rajita. I think that's incredibly generous. I'm sure that a lot of the people here are going to take this into account, and I hope that you do, because it's an amazing opportunity. Thank you so much, Zoya, also for answering Mona. I think that it's great to hear that there are other women, girls right now that are looking up to all of you and thinking, this is what I want to do. How do I do it? And I think that what you two have said now gives a lot of really concrete advice on how to actually achieve those goals. So I really thank you both for what you've shared with everybody here today, and also for that very generous offer of mentoring. I think that's a great idea, and I'm sure that everybody would be happy to also provide any answers to any questions that you might have that we don't have time to answer here. So I don't know if we have time for another question, or if we're already out of time.
I think we can fit in 2 small questions. These ones are for Dr. Ravi specifically. So I'll start off with the first one that was asked, and it's asking, it seems that young Indian women prefer careers in the civil service more than careers in politics. And if so, why is this the case? So yeah, I'll give it to you.
So I'll try to respond to that. I think in the civil service, I remember, for example, initially when you join, you go as the collector of a district, or you're the assistant collector. So it really ignites the imagination of a lot of young people. I remember I used to be the collector of a place called Godhra. And years later, I mean, I came across, a few young girls who had made it to the civil services. And when got talking to them, I didn't realize, but they said that, ma'am, you were an inspiration for us. So we may not realize, you're moving around in the district. And just as Zoya said it so beautifully, watching her sitting with her uniform, often when you see the smart pilot, a lady come out, we may not realize how many young minds we are inspiring. And I think these are things, and also actively, some of it may happen passively without our knowing. But I think, so the civil service as against politics, probably, because in politics, you see, maybe at the levels of the village level, taluka level, there's the rough and tumble of politics, and you'll have women and men, and sometimes it's a more equal world. But then in the civil services, because there is a little bit of a chain of command, although you do it with a lot of grace, sensitivity. So maybe if you're like the captain of your ship, or the pilot of your aircraft, if you will, you're sitting on the driving seat and carrying your district through, droughts, through elections, through scarcity, through a calamity, and through celebrations, all of it. I think it does make people do like, and you're at an age usually that is typically the age, most of the officers that come there, you're in your 30s, 20s. And so every word that there's a lot of fangirling and all that. And when there are women with that kind of substance, which is what I think most of them in these positions are, and the integrity, commitment to work, all of that is there, then I think it's a great education. You don't have to go to a school and teach, but your very presence, the kind of, by your being, because we teach by lecture, but we teach mostly by example and inspiration. So if that is something, and this also the fact that I wanted to add a little bit about the earlier things. I completely agree with Rajita saying that as a child, I used to have a little diary and write down. I tell my children and all the other children that I'm in touch with, I used to call it gilded words, or, golden dreams, and write down all my dreams. And I think there's a certain power. You may write those dreams, you have faith in it, you close it, but when you see it every day, something there, it's like a visual, you're actually constructing that in front of your vision of what you would be 20 years down the line. And I think when there's a very powerful effect that this visualization has. And along with it, I think another thing that I would like young girls to also develop is a bit of thick skin. There's this very interesting story that there are a bunch of frogs trying to climb the Eiffel Tower, if you will, or maybe the Tower of London. Instantly, I used to study it the London School of Economics many years ago. So I'm very happy that the team is doing this. And as Rajita volunteered and Zoya did, even this forum, I think a remarkable job by Hasti and team. If you feel maybe once a quarter or something, or at some periodicity, you want to invite us and just have a Q&A. And if it's going to be of value, we would love to volunteer. But instead of it being frittered away, dissipated, it'll be nice if it's channelized in a forum that's really of benefit to people. And so this Eiffel Tower or Tower of London, there are all these frogs that, and there's a big crowd slowly, which is dissuading them and say, hey, are you crazy? Have you gone insane? There's no way you can climb up. But finally, there's one frog that makes it. And then there are a bunch of newspaper and television, all those cameramen coming and asking that frog, hey, how did you make it? And the frog says, so did you get it? The frog is deaf. So sometimes we have to become partially deaf to criticism if we want to do this. So, and I think also about any idea, anything that you want to do, initially it is met with a lot of resistance. When you persist, because you feel there is some gum in it, as we would say, there's something in it, then it's met with anger. So there's rejection, anger. But if you really persist, because there is something, that there comes a point when people mellow down and finally there's acceptance. So I call this the Rama mantra, the rejection, anger, and then the mellowing and acceptance. So any idea, if you're really passionate, you might get some opposition. People may think, but if you're really persistent, I'm not saying you shout and scream, but you can, in your own quiet, dignified way, make it happen. And then that's what all these wonderful women here today, Vinita, all of you have shown, and of course, Francisca too. Thank you.
That was a really great answer. The question after that was about kind of motivation. So I think you kind of touched in on that with your answer to the previous question. So that was great. I think we'll have to close now. So I would just like to say on behalf of LSE India Forum, thank you so much to all these speakers and for their really generous offers of assistance to all of our attendees. Today's been a really inspirational talk, and we're just really honored to have you guys be included in our first ever Women's Empowerment panel. So thank you so much.
Thank you all, and thank you, Gina and Hasti, for organizing.
Thank you very much. So wonderful to be here. Thank you.
Thank you to all my co-panelists, participants, to everyone. It has been a wonderful time that we all had.
Namaste.
Thank you again. Namaste. And hope to network with all of us, because there's such amazing stories we heard from all of you.
Gina,
thank you.
That would be nice if you can connect all of us, because we don't have each other's emails and phone numbers. So if you could kindly do that, it would be really great.
Thank you to all the Wonder Women present here today who gave me the goosebumps, and truly inspired by all of you. I've taken away so much on my own, and thank you, Professor Francesca, for moderating. Thank you, Hasti. Thank you for all the Q&A session and everything that you've been doing behind the scenes to make this possible. And thank you to all the future dreamers. Thank you to all the audience who is watching here today. I think all of us have taken away from this, whether it's us as individuals and or one of you watching. So thank you for everything. And London School of Economics, of course.